Recognize that those devices, those phones, you pay for, but you do not own. Their software can and is updated. It's updated remotely. It's done all the times. And in most cases, this is a good thing. If you don't update your phone, believe me, guys, I know a little bit about this. It's vulnerable just to simple malware out there. It's a very dangerous thing. But at the same time, you have to recognize that when you look at the phone and it appears, the screen's off, it's just sitting on the desk, it's not doing anything, it is on, it is active, it is communicating to 100 different parties about where it is, about what you're doing, about what your activities are. It's polling Gmail servers to check for email updates. It's polling weather servers to say what this is, but it's reporting your location to the server to, say this, that, or the other. It's uploading your contact to Facebook, even when you're not installing an app that is for Facebook, but simply because the developers of Facebook went, we can design what's called an SDK, a software development kit, this little shim of software packages that makes life easier for programmers that live in Paris, Bratislava, Albuquerque, wherever, and they give it away for free. And they go, if you bake this into your software that is not Facebook, we'll give you all these nice things for free. We'll give you analytics for free about, what kind of phones are being used, how many people have installed, all this great stuff. These people are like, hey, wonderful. Those people aren't privacy experts. It's unfair to expect that they're privacy experts. But what that Facebook shim is also doing is every time someone installs this thing, it's reporting back to the mothership. It's reporting back to Mark Zuckerberg, the whole human population that's using this app, information to them as well. And there are very few legal constraints on how that's used. The United States is one of the only developed countries in the world that does not have a basic privacy law. In Europe, where they have what's called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, this thing is supposed to be, the big scary law all the corporations are afraid of. If you don't abide by it, there's 4% of global revenue fines, which for Facebook is, an insane amount of money. And yet we know Facebook has been violating it. We know Google has been violating it. We know they're violating it right now. And they would be facing the greatest fines in the history of, corporatocracy anywhere. But now, years later, many court cases later, these fines have yet to be applied once. And so you have to recognize the law is not going to save you. The law might make work harder for the government. It might make the police check 3 more boxes. It might make someone who looks like me sitting at the NSA in Hawaii, who doesn't know about your protests, who has no skin in the game, who's going to the beach afterwards. And they are looking at these things. They are looking at the network. They're looking at the contacts between phones, who you called, how long you're on the phone for. And they're deriving insights from that, even if you are using an encrypted messenger, because what they're trying to create is what they call the social graph, right? The connections between people, the connections between devices that really represent who matters to us the most, who we love the most, where we go the most. As long as your phone is with you, and as long as your phone is on, and as long as you're paying for it with a card to a company that's associated with your name, that's associated with your billing address, right? This tracks you around. And some people go out there and they give themselves a false sense of safety because they go, well, I bought a track phone at Walmart. I bought it in cash. It's not in my name. It's not connected to my network. I'm okay. Then they keep it next to their phone. One's in pocket A, one's in purse B, and they drive back home and they stay there overnight. And they go to the protest the next day, and then they go to the convention the next day. And these phones are moving in tandem, right? Well, remember, there's a map of all of your phone's movements. That's the nature of how the network works. Think about when you dial a phone number, how does only that phone ring out of all the phones in the world? Well, the phone network has to have some general idea of what cell phone tower somewhere in the world any given phone handset is connected with at any given time. That means that record exists somewhere. And it could be deleted after you move away from that tower. And it should be deleted after you move away from that tower because it's no longer useful. But it is not. When we look at agencies like the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, in the United States, and their cooperation with a company called AT&T, one of the largest phone providers in the United States, we found that they were keeping records about their customers. Your calling records. Everyone you had ever called, every pizza shop, every grandmother, every boyfriend, every girlfriend, wife, husband, son, daughter, mother, father, going back to 1987. There are people listening to this live stream right now where if you're an AT&T customer, they have every call you've ever made and they keep it just because they can sell it to an agency like the DEA as a service. And they do this without a warrant, but a lower standard of legal paperwork called a subpoena. And that's just, who you're calling, not what you said on the call and things like that. The last thing, and then I'll shut up because I know this has gone long, is your movements, right? Because I talked about that, and people think, oh, well, I'll turn off location on my phone, right? All that does is it stops giving the phone's sense of its location to applications, right? It's saying, I'm not going to tell Google Maps where I am right now. I'm not going to tell my weather app where I am right now. But the phone always knows where it is as long as it's connected to the cell phone network. And that means the cell phone network always knows where the phone is as long as it's turned on. There are ways you can do this in airplane mode, remove battery. But the whole thing is to understand that phones are fundamentally tracking devices. They must be in order to provide all the communications capabilities that we expect today in the modern framework. They don't have to remain that way. We could demand that network be changed, be re-architected. But as it is today, we're using standards that were decided and determined in the 1970s, the 1980s, that give companies and governments all this power, and they're very reluctant to let that go. AT&T is keeping those records, what's called cell site location information, where your phone has gone, regardless of what the location setting on your phone is, or regardless of what Google Apple knows. Going back to 2007 or 2008, I think. So remember that even the phone that you lost years ago, the phone company still knows where that went at the lowest moment in your life.